"God, what kind of place is this American?" William screamed, and fell into a pile of broken stone. His whole body shook hard, and would not stop only minutes ago. This American explorer was in the jungle. Now he was trapped in a void battlefield. There was no blue sky above him. A dim, torn heaven hung overhead, ripped open by 5-colored radiance. Several figures, wrapped in thunder and bloodlight, slammed into each other at insane speed. Every clash shook the world until mountains underfoot cracked and collapsed. This was not special effects. The air reeked of blood, and the stink was real enough to make him gag straight ahead. A gaunt old man in a blood-colored robe crushed an opponent's skull in one hand. The old man turned with a face full of savage malice, his poisoned gaze locked onto William in an instant. That was the pressure aura of a nascent soul patriarch to a mortal. It was a mountain grinding down on bone. A mortal insect had wandered in and offended his eyes. The patriarch bared his teeth in a cruel grin. He flicked a finger. A blood-colored sword beam screamed forward with force that could shave off a mountain peak. The mind of William went blank. Instinct made him do the weakest thing possible. He shut his eyes tight. He lifted his right hand, caked with mud, in front of his face, as if a dirty palm could block certain death. In that single beat, something deep inside William stirred. A formless sword demon that had slept for 10,000 years woke to a thin killing intent. From outside to that ancient demon entity, William was the only sword sheath. Anyone who tried to damage the sheath was committing a capital sin against the dignity of the sword demon. There was no dazzling light. There was no earth-shaking roar in front of the raised palm of William's face, twisted for a breath with no warning. Then, an indescribable will swept out like a wave of terror. The blood-colored sword beam shattered on the spot. The arrogant nascent soul patriarch behind it did not even have time to scream. In the blink of an eye, he was crushed. Into the finest blood missed the sword. She did not stop. It tore the cloud layer above into a pitch-black rift. 100 li long, it looked like a scar carved into the sky. The battlefield that had been full of killing cries fell into dead silence. The surviving Burial Sword Valley cultivators froze in midair. Their eyes were so wide, they looked ready to burst. They had witnessed a miracle with their own eyes. This mysterious man in strange clothes had only lifted a hand like he was swatting a fly, and he erased a late nascent soul peerless devil in an instant. Even the Tao laws were severed by that strike. William slowly opened one eye. The pain he expected never came. He stared at the drifting blood mist and could not understand what he was seeing. His legs went soft, and he could barely stand. Not far away, the surviving Grand Elder of Burial Sword Valley dropped from the clouds first. He hit the ground and went to his knees. His forehead pressed hard to the earth. His voice shook with awe and desperate gratitude. All of Burial Sword Valley welcomes the sword Venerable sent from heaven. Thank you, Venerable One, for saving our lives. With that kneel, hundreds of cultivators behind him dropped down as one. A dark sea of people bowed toward William. No one dared to even breathe too loud. William stood there with his mouth open. He tried to ask what had happened, but his throat was so dry no sound would come out. To them, his stunned silence looked like return to the simple. It looked like a true master who did not bother with words. William felt like a fragile porcelain statue. Several white-haired elders supported him with gentle spirit power. They did not even dare touch the edge of his clothes. They rode escape light and carried him like stars, circling a moon. They escorted him back to Burial Sword Valley. The mountains here were like swords thrust into the clouds. They placed him directly inside the core of the sect-restricted grounds. They brought him onto the sword sacrifice platform. It was an ancient stone dais, floating over a dark abyss. Dense formation runes covered the surface in complex patterns. In ordinary times, it opened only when the sect faced an extinction calamity. Now it had become the temporary palace of the High Sword Venerable. Sect Master Xianxia ignored his own wounds. He led dozens of elders and hundreds of elite disciples. They knelt in a dark sea beneath the platform. Xianxia pressed his forehead to the cold blue stone. His voice trembled with extreme devotion. I am Xianxia, the 19th Sect Master of Burial Sword Valley. I lead the whole sect to bow before the High Sword Venerable. May the Venerable One enjoy endless immortal fortune. May your lifespan stand equal with heaven. William sat on a massive chair carved from cold jade. His whole body was stiff as wood. This was a grand spectacle that belonged in an ancient costume movie. The terror in his chest climbed to its peak. He tried to stand and explain. Both hands flailed in the air. Words spilled out in a mess. No, you misunderstand. I am not a god, please. Let me go home. The panic, denial, and plea sounded different to everyone below. The Grand Elder knelt in the front row. He lifted his head slightly from the corner of his eye. He saw William's hands moving fast. His pupils tightened in those movements that looked like nonsense. The Grand Elder saw a rhythm that matched the tracks of the heavenly Tao. Every motion looked like the evolution of a profound sword art. The English from William's mouth made it worse to the cultivators. It sounded like ancient Tao resonance from a forgotten age. The Venerable One is forming seals. No, the Venerable One is using the rules of this world to cleanse the dust of the mortal realm from our bodies. The Grand Elder shook inside. He sent mind transmission to Sect Master King Songzi. At once the Venerable One speaks true words. We cannot grasp the will of heaven. Yet, the dignity inside those sounds makes my soul tremble. This must be the primeval divine language passed down from the upper realm, William shouted, until his mouth went dry. Then he realized no one tried to seize him. Instead, they buried their heads even lower. Their bodies shook like sieves. William froze. A scene flashed through his mind. The red-robed freak exploding into blood. Mr. Ridiculous thought took root. He wondered if crossing over awakened words become law in him. He wondered if he had truly gained a power that makes spoken words become reality, or if these locals were right, and he was a god who descended into the world. The fear faded little by little. In its place came the weakness after surviving disaster, then a swelling thrill. He could not stop. William drew a deep breath. He stopped yelling. He tested the situation and sat back down. He made what he thought was a dignified posture. He lifted a hand lightly. He signaled them to rise. They saw the Venerable One withdraw his divine art and grant permission to stand Kang Songzi, and the rest felt pardon from death. Tears filled their eyes as they trembled with joy. The Grand Elder felt even more certain this sword Venerable, who fell from the heavens, was unfathomably strong. Yet he did not seem hard to deal with. If we enshrine him within the sect burial, Sword Valley will surely rise. The Grand Elder waved behind him at once. Disciples who had been ready filed out in order. They carried rare treasures from the storehouse, 10,000-year vermilion fruit, dragon blood, herb, one after another. They presented them to William with deep respect. William stared at the radiant fruit. He swallowed. He believed his treatment was that of an emperor. He finally relaxed and let himself enjoy it. He did not know that in the hearts of the sect leaders, they were laughing withered. Bones' Grand Elder was an old man at the edge of the grave. His eye sockets were sunken, yet a near fanatical light flickered in them now. When his dried palm swept down the foundation of burial, Sword Valley, that had been piled up for thousands of years, was sent in a steady stream onto the sword sacrifice platform. To him, the stockpile of the storehouse was not worth mentioning. It was nothing beside the mad plan that had lasted 1,000 years. William looked at the strange fruits laid out in front of him, like a buffet. His heart was already bursting with delight. The 10,000-year vermilion fruit was crimson. All over it gave off a shocking wave of heat. He bit into it as casually as if it were an apple. Some disciples watched with faces twisted in pain. It was like watching sacred treasure treated as cheap food. Someone even saw William dislike the rough taste of the dragon blood herb. William casually tossed it onto the ground. A core disciple almost charged forward to fight to the death. Withered Bones' Grand Elder stopped him with a single severe look. This was exactly the effect Withered Bones' Grand Elder wanted. He bent low at the waist and stood at the side of William. On the surface, he was respectful to the extreme, but in those cloudy old eyes hid a coldness, like a man sizing up livestock in a body. This frail, they had to strengthen the flesh as fast as possible. If the sword demon broke out of the body, then burial Sword Valley would meet an extinction calamity. This was not worshipping a god. This was spending without limit to raise a sword sheath. William did not know any of those schemes. He only felt his whole body burn hot. It was like endless energy was tearing around inside him. He complained that these exotic fruits came with no salad dressing. Even as he complained, the medicinal power slammed through him with savage force. It crashed and surged inside his belly in a wild collision. He still did not cultivate even a trace of spirit power, yet his skin began to shine with a strange metallic glow. Muscle fibers were ripped apart by the torrent of medicine, then rebuilt again and again. To ease the heat that felt ready to explode, William reached for the bluestone armrest and squeezed. A crisp cracking sound rang out. The 10,000-year bluestone that was hard as iron crumbled in his grip. William stared at his own hand in shock. He could not believe he had awakened the strength of a strong man. In the shadow beside him, Withered Bones' Grand Elder finally let a cold smile rise. The polishing of this sword sheath was finally showing its first results. The days on the sword sacrifice platform were dull and lavish. William patted his swollen belly. The burning heat had eased a little when he crushed the armrest, but the vast medicinal power still slammed through every limb and bone. It left him feeling stifled. This cursed otherworld fed him like royalty, yet it did not even have a decent gym. The boredom pressed on him. Like a lid, he stood up with nothing to do. He faced the noon sun. He let out a lazy yawn. He lifted both arms high. He arched his back. Hard he stretched until his whole body opened. In that instant, the formless sword demon in his dantian felt cramped, annoyed. It shifted inside the sheath. It rolled over like a beast in its sleep. That single roll was enough. A razor-cold formless sword. Chi burst out through his body. It did not hurt William at all. It howled along the line of his outstretched arms like a mad dragon. It sliced straight through the void in front of him. Saintess Hongxiu had just stepped onto the platform, carrying Supreme Spirit Tea. She froze where she stood. Terror filled her beautiful eyes. In their reflection, the distant mountains changed 10 li away. Sky-piercing peak twisted out of alignment. Without a sound, there was no earth-shaking blast. There was only a dead silence that swallowed sound itself. Then the summit began to slide. It moved along a slanted cut, as smooth as a mirror. The roaring sound arrived late, only after the mountain mass collapsed. Did the thunder roll through Burial Sword Valley? Dust rose and blotted out the sky. The jade tray fell from her hands and struck the stone with a hard clang. Scalding tea splashed across her skirt. Him she did not feel it at all. She stared at William in his lazy pose. That he still had not pulled back. Fear in her gaze turned into blazing worship in a heartbeat. To her it was obvious. The sword venerable had just practiced the legendary sword of non-action. It looked like a casual stretch in truth. It matched the heavenly Tao. Heavy became light. This was the realm of return to the simple. The Tao follows nature. No sword beats sword. This disciple understands. Saintess Hongxiu dropped to her knees. Her forehead slammed against the blue stone. She shook all over with excitement. Her shout snapped the elders and disciples below out of panic. They all bowed toward the severed mountain. Some went further. They sat down cross-legged on the spot. They claimed they could feel the lingering heaven and earth sword intent. They said their stalled realm had truly begun to loosen. William stared at the rolling dust in the distance. Then he looked at his own hands that had been waving a moment ago. The shock lasted only a blink while joy surged up from his chest and drowned everything. So that old man did not lie. He really was the chosen one. He could level a mountain with a lazy wave. The feeling of power made him lightheaded and drunk. All the caution and self-doubt were thrown far beyond the clouds. If he had power like this, taking the throne of this world would be effortless. He cleared his throat. He copied the arrogant pose of a movie villain. He pointed at a row of antique side halls nearby. He made clumsy gestures of tearing them down and rebuilding them. No one understood his words, but the commanding attitude said everything. Withered bones. Grand Elder leaned in at once with understanding. He did not know what the sword venerable wanted, but as long as William kept stirring trouble, his body would fuse with sword intent faster. Breaking a few halls meant nothing at all. The sun blazed overhead. In the shadowed corner of the sword sacrifice platform, something darker than darkness began to gather. It was Ghost Shadow, the gold badge assassin of Bloodshaw. Sect, he was a top killer at peak Golden Core. He pressed his heartbeat down until it was almost gone. His body became a wisp of smoke in the shade. His gaze stayed nailed to the unguarded figure on the throne in his eyes. The so-called sword venerable looked like a joke. William was sprawled on a jade couch with no dignity at all. No spirit shield circled him. He looked like a walking corpse waiting to be collected. William lounged there, half bored, half drunk on power. He had just swallowed a few 10,000-year vermilion fruits. Heat raged inside his belly and made him restless. The mountain he sliced by accident had filled his head with fearless pride. He was sure he had awakened an unbeatable mind power. He felt like the ruler of this world. Then a faint buzzing slipped into his ear. It sounded like some rude fly ruining his nap. His mood turned sour, his brow pinched tight. Ghost Shadow moved. The instant William reached for the fruit platter, a gap opened. 3 Zhang 2, Zhang 1, Zhang Ghost Shadow burst out like a black arrow. A poison blade cut the air with a thin scream. It shot straight for William's throat. All his cultivation and skill poured into that one strike. Cave, fast as lightning, cruel as death. The blade was about to kiss skin. The formless sword demon inside. William sensed an intruder at once. To that arrogant ancient monster, this was not a threat. It was a speck of dust trying to stain the sword sheath. It was blasphemy against sword dignity. William only lifted a hand in annoyance. He waved through the air like he was shooing a fly that was not even there. There was no roar, there was no spray of blood. Only a tiny twist in space along the path of his palm. Ghost Shadows. Sneer froze on his face, his body, his poisoned blade. Even the space he stood in, all of it, was shredded in a breath by an unseen sword ward. It was wiped away like an eraser across paper. A living man vanished without ash. William glanced at his empty side. He muttered that the bugs in this place sure moved fast. Then he shrugged and kept eating. In the hidden shadows, the Burial Sword Valley, elders went cold. All over sweat spilled down their backs in their sight. A feared golden core assassin had been erased like dust. The sword venerable had not even bothered to show killing intent. Their awe climbed to a new peak. Soon, the whole cultivation world would hear it. Burial Sword Valley was guarded by a true god, and even a lazy wave meant a golden core could disappear forever. Withered bones. Grand Elder forced a sycophantic smile onto his bark-dry face and bowed beside the jade couch. That reckless fly was already erased to nothing, but the lingering stink of blood had spoiled the sword venerable mood. Withered bones used the moment to beg the venerable one to move to the back mountain restricted ground, to bathe and change and wash away mortal dust. Heat still churned inside William and his skin felt sticky and wrong, so he brightened at once and set out for the back mountain. Surrounded by white-haired elders, the bathing place was the sword washing pool that Burial Sword Valley had guarded for 1,000 years. The pool was no clear spring, but bone-corroding spirit fluid made from earth-lung poison fire and 10,000-year cold marrow. Even a flying sword would lose a layer in it, let alone mortal flesh. William stood at the edge and saw eerie green water and bubbling blisters. But the flattery all the way here had gone to his head, and he took it for a top-tier otherworld. Hot spring he stripped without shame and jumped in a heartbeat. Later, a shriek exploded inside the sealed stone chamber. This was no hot spring, it was boiling acid. William felt his skin carved by countless dull blades. The pain smashed his mind blank. He thrashed the surface trying to flee, but withered bones. Grand Elder had already opened an isolation formation. The formation pinned William in place. It filtered his house again and again. When the sound reached outside, it became deep, heavy thunder. With a steady rhythm, disciples, guarding the restricted ground outside, held solemn faces and listened to the Tao thunder sound from deep in the stone chamber. To them, the Venerable One was using supreme power to temper the body and purge mortal impurities. Every low boom meant a rise in realm. A few true disciples, with sharper insight, even heard the true meaning of sword Tao in the rhythm of those screams. They sat down cross-legged on the spot with wild joy, as if granted great guidance all night. William fainted again and again in torment. Each time the pain dragged him back awake. The formless sword demon inside him seemed tired of such a weak vessel. To keep the host from collapsing, it was forced to stir its origin sword. Chi fused the medicine into his shattered body. To repair it, when the first dawnlight pierced the dome, the pool water had turned clear to the bottom. All medicinal power had been forced into William. William crawled onto the bank shaking. He thought he would be corroded into bare bone, but when he looked down, his jaw dropped. His skin was no longer pale, but coated in a cold, dark gold metallic sheen. When he flicked his arm, it rang. Like metal, fear turned into blazing joy. He thought disaster had become fortune. He believed he had forged the legendary Vajra, indestructible body. When Withered Bones, Grand Elder, pushed the door open. With a face full of concern, William was moved. To tears he gripped the old man's bony hand and thanked him again and again in broken Chinese. Withered Bones felt the toughness like divine iron. Greed and cruelty flashed in his eyes. This sword sheath was finally polished to completion. William had just gotten used to this tough body that shimmered with dark gold light. He was still lost in the joy of being bulletproof and blade-proof. Then, an ill-timed shout tore the calm apart. Zhao Wuji, the first true disciple of Burial Sword Valley, stormed into the restricted grounds he held. His life-bound spirit soared. His face was twisted with jealousy. He swore to expose this so-called supreme sword. Venerable, cold swordlight aimed at him. William reacted on pure instinct and tried to run. He stumbled back in panic. His foot slipped and his body had to lean away. To everyone watching, that clumsy dodge became a look of contempt. It became a tactical lean back in the face of an insect's provocation. The sudden noise woke the formless sword demon inside him. It sensed a weak, malicious aura moving toward its sword sheath. To an ancient demon entity, that crude sword intent was an insult to its dignity. William did not need to do anything. The sword demon released a thread of pressure aura to crush the noisy fly in a heartbeat. Zhao Wuji felt a terror born in the soul, ice cold. Fear froze every meridian in his body. His spirit sword wailed and shattered piece by piece. He shook like he was struck by thunder and spee. At a mouthful of blood, he dropped to his knees on the spot. His Tao heart shattered before the aura of an absolute superior. Withered Bones, Grand Elder, watched with cold eyes. He waved for someone to drag the ruined Zhao Wuji away. Then he put on a wide smile and led William toward the main hall. The sect masters of the 18 surrounding sects had already gathered there. They came only to see the true face of the sword venerable William was pushed up onto the towering sword sacrifice platform. He looked down at the terrifying cultivator leaders below. Panic flooded his chest. He still had to force his face to stay calm under their burning gaze as they begged for guidance. William went blank. He could only pretend to be profound and recite a saying he heard on earth. Tao can be spoken. It is not the constant Tao. These 6 words were obscure. Through the mind transmission used across the cultivation world, they carried an ancient weathered tone at the same time. The sword demon grew extremely irritated by the mixed chaotic auras in the hall. It trembled with displeasure inside the sheath. That tremor was amplified through William's tempered metal body. It triggered a violent resonance in the spiritual chi of heaven, and Earth's spiritual chi within 100 li roared and surged. A visible vortex formed above the main hall. The sect masters below felt the vast heavenly phenomenon and lit up with wild joy. They believed the sword venerable had used words become law to draw forth Tao. Resonance. They all threw themselves to the ground. They were drunk on insight as they tried to comprehend a supreme sword Tao that did not exist. William woke at dawn and saw black fissures spreading across the skin of his arms. They looked like fine porcelain about to shatter. A burning heat drilled deep into his bones. He jolted upright in fright and stared at them until his breath turned ragged. He rubbed at the fissures as if he could wipe them away. They did not move. The burning only grew sharper. Withered bones. Grand Elder arrived with a calm face. He examined the fissures as if he had expected them. He told William this was the sign of a body evolving under sword chi. He said the flesh sheath was being forced toward a higher form. He praised William and said this was the road to a divine body. He spoke as if it were a blessing from heaven. William listened, and the fear in his chest melted into vanity. He stood before a bronze mirror and admired the dark gold sheen on his skin. He imagined himself awakening a terrifying power, like a comic book hero. He even enjoyed the pain, because it made him feel chosen. Night fell. A scarlet bloodlight tore open the clouds and trashed into the heart of Burial Sword Valley. Blood Saber Patriarch had arrived. His bloodshot aura was thick enough to make the air reek. His name alone could shake the eastern region. He was also one of the few who knew the secret behind the god-making plan. He came to claim his share. He descended with the arrogance of a god. Yet the mountain paths and formation traps twisted into a maze. He lost direction in the tangled roots. By accident, he pushed open an ancient stone door hidden under vines. He stumbled into a sealed chamber buried in dust. A dim, ever-burning lamp lit the chamber with weak flame at its center. A vast mural covered the stone wall. The brushwork was ancient and savage. It depicted a grand sacrifice that made the skin crawl. In the mural, a man from beyond the heavens stood on the sword sacrifice platform. His clothes were strange and out of place. The outline of his body matched William too well around the platform. Crowds gathered not in worship, but in hunger. Formation runes wrapped the platform. Like chains the ritual fed on the man's body. And so the final scene was worse. The man's flesh shattered completely. A blood mist burst out and nourished a demonic sword. The sword tore free from the corpse. As if being born, the crowd around it cheered with joy.
William stood frozen, as if his feet had been nailed to the floor. A chill sank into his stomach and dragged his spirit down into the abyss. Then, a voice slid through the stone from a hidden room beside the mural. It was Withered Bones, Grand Elder, speaking to Blood Saber Patriarch. He said the heavenly flesh sheath had no spiritual root. He said that was why it could hold the monster without resistance. He said the sheath would crack and break when the sword demon fully awakened. He said the demonic sword would be reborn from the host blood mist. Blood Saber Patriarch let out a low laugh in the dark. He asked when the harvest would be ready. Withered Bones Grand Elder answered. Without hesitation, cold rose from William's feet to his skull. In that moment he understood everything. He was not a sword venerable sent from heaven. He was a pig being fattened for slaughter. He was a disposable vessel made to hold a monster, and he was already starting to crack. William staggered out of the sealed chamber. Fear clenched his heart like a hard fist. He ignored the drilling burn in his arms. He ran straight for the exit of Burial Sword Valley. The instant he was about to step out of the core grounds, a dark red curtain of light rose. From nothing he slammed into it. The rebound flung him onto his back. He scrambled up in a dirty panic. He swung his arms at the barrier again and again. He tried to copy the miracle that cut a mountain. He screamed until his throat tore. Raw, he begged the monster inside him to protect its host. But the night sky stayed silent. No sword. Chi answered him. Nothing moved. William was only a mortal waving at empty air. He looked ridiculous. He felt the weight of hopelessness crush him. A dry, rasping laugh came from behind the Grand Elder, walked out of the shadows with hands behind his back. The humble mask was gone from his face. Cold butcher calm replaced it. He flicked a finger. Several strands of spirit power turned into ropes. They wrapped William tight. In an instant, William shouted questions. In terror, the Grand Elder only sneered. A sword sheath that is about to crack does not need to know anything. Lie down. Wait for the sacrifice. William was dragged back. Like a dead dog, he was hauled onto the sword sacrifice platform. He slammed onto the ice-cold stone. Runes all around him began to glow with a strange bloodlight. The Grand Elder turned and walked away. He left William in the center of the formation. He left him there to wait for death. Under the crushing weight of despair, William stopped wasting strength. His breathing slowed. It grew calm in a way that felt wrong. He understood the body could not escape. The only road left was the devil living inside him. William closed his eyes. He forced his consciousness down into the sea of consciousness. In that endless black void, he finally faced the thing that shared his body. It was a mass of terrifying sharpness, with no fixed form. It hung over his inner world, like a blade made of cold. Its aura froze the soul. The ancient formless sword demon did not even bother to look at him. The contempt was bone deep. It was arrogance carved into the core. William did not kneel. He did not beg. He threw back his head and laughed like a madman. He stared straight at that hanging sharpness. He pushed a venomous provocation through pure intent. He told the sword demon the ants outside were not worshipping a god. They were forging chains. Burial Sword Valley was using William flesh as a cage. They meant to enslave the noble sword demon forever. They meant to refine it into an obedient sect weapon. The dead void erupted at once. A violent tide rolled through the sea of consciousness. Pride that ancient could not accept being touched by insects. William felt the rage rising like a storm. He threw out his last wager. He offered to surrender control of the body. He offered even his soul as fuel to ignite sword chi. He set one condition: let the sword demon kill everyone outside. The sharpness in the void trembled. A will that could end the world leaned down toward him. Madness met madness, and a grim agreement was made. A scarlet blood moon hung high. At the zenith, it dyed all of Burial Sword Valley a bleak, dark red. The air was filled with a nauseating rust stench. It was the breath of countless ancient swords rotting through the ages. It was also the omen of slaughter about to arrive. Around the sword sacrifice platform, thousands of disciples chanted in low voices. Their chanting gathered into a wave that felt almost solid. It shook the cliff walls until loose stones rattled down in showers. The Grand Elder stood at the core of the formation. The righteous mask on his face had already collapsed. In its place was madness and greed. Taken to the extreme, his hands formed complex seals without pause. With a harsh shout, he drove the art down a blood-red net of light called the Sword Slave. Seal dropped from above it, meant to cover the mortal on the platform. It meant to refine him together with the divine thing inside his body. William lay quietly on the icy stone slab, facing a pressure aura that could crush a soul. He did not scream. Instead, the corner of his mouth lifted into an eerie curve. He fully opened the defenses of his mind. He handed over control of the body without resistance. In an instant, endless black swallowed his eyes. The weak mortal aura vanished at once. In its place rose a brutal sword intent, like it came from primeval wilderness. The arrogant sword demon finally woke. It felt shackles that insects wanted to force upon it. Its fury detonated heaven and earth. A thunderous boom shook the platform. The blood net shattered into countless points of light. The moment it touched the skin of William, a ring of sword chi, black as ink, burst outward from the sword sacrifice platform. It swept in every direction with insane speed. The Grand Elder took the first hit. He did not even have time to pull back the vicious grin on his face. His protective aura broke like thin paper in a breath. He was ground into a cloud of blood, missed by countless strands of sword intent. Even his nascent soul could not escape. Then came the elders beneath the platform. The magic treasures they relied on were like dead branches before absolute power. They burst apart one after another. The black storm of death raged through the valley. This was a slaughter from one side. Only in the distance Blood-Saber Patriarch and Xianxia Audiobook witnessed the hellish scene. Their courage shattered with terror. They fled toward the valley mouth without caring about anything else. Seeing the sect foundation ruined in a blink, the surviving sect leader of Burial Sword Valley released a bleak howl. In despair, he activated the Burial Sword Annihilation Grand Formation. Buried in the valley floor, the earth shook violently. Magma erupted from deep underground. Dazzling white light swallowed the black sword chi. A massive mushroom cloud rose into the sky. The sect that had endured for 1,000 years was wiped flat. No one knew how long passed when the smoke and dust settled. Heaven and earth held only silent ruins. In a heap of charred rubble, a hand slowly pushed aside a broken pillar. William stumbled out. His clothes were shredded to rags. He was naked from head to toe. That world-ending strike had drained the sword demon and forced it back into sleep. Yet the blast energy also remade this body completely. William looked down at skin clear as jade with faint spiritual light flowing beneath. He knew he was no longer immortal. He spat out dusty grit mixed with bloody foam. The flippancy and panic of before were gone from his eyes. In their place was cold resolve. Like ice, he looked toward the vast and cruel cultivation world. He took his first real step.